This photograph was captured in 1871 at the Danver State Hospital in Massachusetts. The young girl you see here is Katherine Doyle, merely 9 years old. Yet, take a closer look at her image. Her eyes, the stiffness in her stance, and the expression that feels far too mature for a child's face. Katherine Doyle challenged every belief Victorian-era doctors held about the human mind. Her case remains one of the most baffling enigmas even after more than 150 years. This haunting photograph immortalized one of the most unsettling and mysterious medical cases of the 19th century. What happened to Katherine Doyle cannot be explained by medicine, by psychology, or perhaps by anything we can comprehend. The story that follows transcends the limits of ordinary science. It questions the boundaries of human reality itself. To truly grasp Katherine's case, we must return to the America of 1871, a nation still healing from the deep wounds of the Civil War that had ended only 6 years before. Boston at that time was a city in flux, crowded with Irish immigrants escaping famine and hardship in search of new beginnings. Psychiatry was still in its infancy, crude, experimental, and often cruel. Asylums were bleak, hidden institutions where those deemed insane were locked away and forgotten. Society had no real grasp of mental illness, child psychology, or emotional disorders. Anything that deviated from accepted norms was simply confined. The Danver State Hospital, where Katherine spent her final years, was one such grim place. Constructed on land once belonging to the old Salem farms, it carried not only the weight of early medical ignorance, but also the haunting echoes of a darker American past. Its halls bore witness to what we now consider barbaric treatments: endless cold baths, severe restraints, sensory deprivation, and unethical experiments. In this oppressive and primitive setting, Katherine Doyle's case became one of the most shocking and thoroughly documented anomalies in 19th century psychiatry. The physicians of her time, despite their best intentions, lacked both the knowledge and the means to comprehend what they saw in her. Katherine Doyle was born on March 15, 1862, in Boston. She was the daughter of Patrick and Mary Doyle, Irish immigrants who had crossed the ocean in search of hope. Patrick worked as a longshoreman at Boston Harbor, loading and unloading the steady flow of goods, while Mary served as a housemaid for wealthy families in Beacon Hill. The Doyles lived in a modest two-room apartment in Boston's North End, an Irish enclave marked by poverty but bound by faith and kinship. Katherine's early life was filled with the warmth of a close-knit community, the sound of Irish songs and stories, the smell of bread from nearby bakeries, and the folktales told by her grandmother. Parish records and family accounts describe her as a perfectly ordinary child, playful, bright, and affectionate. She loved her rag dolls, helped her mother with small chores, and attended Mass regularly at St. Leonard's Church, where she learned her prayers in Latin. Her teachers described her as an attentive student, curious, well-behaved, and perfectly normal for her age and upbringing. There was nothing about her personality or behavior that hinted at the extraordinary events to come. Mary Doyle would later tell doctors that Katherine was her sweet, gentle girl, a child who delighted in helping around the house and worried whenever her father came home late. Patrick described her as the heart of their home, the light that softened the struggles of poverty. But everything changed abruptly in September of 1869, so suddenly and completely that it continues to puzzle historians and doctors even now. On the morning of September 14, 1869, a Tuesday that Mary Doyle would remember as the day she lost her daughter forever, Katherine awoke transformed. Physically, she looked the same: freckled face, curly brown hair, small frame, but something deep within her had shifted. It was as if the child who went to sleep the night before had been replaced by someone else entirely. The first signs were subtle. She woke later than usual, her movements deliberate and mechanical, and when she joined her parents for breakfast, she sat silently and stared with an expression her mother described as empty but ancient. When spoken to, her reply came in a slightly altered voice, rougher, older, unsettlingly mature for a child. In the days that followed, the changes grew impossible to dismiss. Katherine began to exhibit knowledge and understanding that no child of her age or background could possess. During meals, she made remarks about historical events with astonishing precision, speaking of the American Revolution as though she had lived through it. She discussed details of specific battles unknown to her teachers or parents. Even more unnerving, she displayed familiarity with classical philosophy, quoting Aristotle and Plato with an ease that implied comprehension rather than memorization. When her bewildered father asked how she knew such things, she only smiled, a strange, knowing smile that frightened her parents, and said she had always known. Her grasp of religion became equally disturbing. She began reciting lengthy passages from the Bible in flawless Latin, not the simple prayers taught at Sunday school, but obscure Old Testament verses few priests knew by heart. When Father O'Brien from St. Leonard's tested her, he found himself engaged in complex theological debates far beyond her years. The priest left shaken, unable to explain what he had witnessed. Yet it wasn't only knowledge that had changed. Katherine began to reveal uncanny awareness of the private lives of those around her. She spoke casually of neighbors' secrets, of infidelities and debts, of sins no one had confessed aloud. Her parents were horrified. How could she know these things? But soon the transformation took a darker, more sinister turn. Katherine's fascination with death grew obsessive. She no longer asked childish questions about heaven or angels. Instead, she inquired about pain, execution, and disease with a detached curiosity. She spoke vividly of medieval tortures, described ancient assassinations, and recounted Egyptian mummification rituals as if she had seen them firsthand. Her eyes would light up as she talked, and her smile twisted into something chillingly unnatural. This wasn't childish fascination. It was delight. Then came the self-inflicted harm. Katherine began scratching and biting herself, striking her head against walls until bruises formed. But she never cried. Instead, she seemed to revel in it as if pain brought her a strange satisfaction. Her mother tried desperately to stop her, hiding anything sharp or dangerous, yet Katherine always found something: a nail in the wall, a shard of glass, a kitchen utensil, to continue her strange rituals. When asked why she did it, her answer was always the same: because I want to, or more disturbingly, because something tells me to. Animals, once drawn to her kindness, now recoiled in terror. Dogs barked wildly when she approached, cats vanished, and even birds seemed to avoid her presence. When her mother asked why animals behaved so fearfully, Katherine only gave that same cold, eerie smile and whispered, "They know what I am now. Mommy, they're smarter than you." As the months went by, her condition deepened into something that defied understanding. Her transformation no longer just mental or emotional, but something far more disturbing, something beyond explanation. She began exhibiting physical abilities that were utterly impossible for a child of her size and age. The first recorded instance was her sudden unnatural strength. Katherine, who had always been a small, delicate girl, could now break solid objects with alarming ease. In December 1869, during a sudden outburst of anger, she snapped a sturdy oak chair completely in two with her bare hands. Patrick, familiar with heavy timber from his work at the docks, examined the shattered chair in disbelief. The break required a level of force no ordinary adult, let alone a child, could produce. On another occasion, Katherine left the clear imprint of her fingers embedded in the family's wooden table. Not shallow scratches, but deep, permanent grooves as if carved by metal instruments. Mary attempted to sand them down, but the impressions remained as eerie proof of her daughter's unnatural strength. Katherine also began to display an extraordinary resistance to fatigue and discomfort. She could remain still for hours in rigid, uncomfortable positions without showing any sign of strain. One night, Mary found her standing in the center of the parlor at 2 a.m, utterly motionless and staring blankly at the wall. When questioned, Katherine calmly said she had been standing there since dinner, over 6 hours, without moving once. Her resistance to cold was particularly unnerving. During the brutal Boston winter of 1869-1870, she would often wander outside dressed far too lightly, showing no reaction to the freezing temperatures that made even adults tremble. On one occasion, Patrick discovered her asleep in the backyard, lying in the snow and clothed only in a thin nightgown. Yet when he rushed to check on her, she showed no signs of hypothermia or distress. Perhaps the most unsettling transformation, however, appeared in her eyes. Neighbors and relatives alike began commenting that there was something unnatural about her gaze, a hypnotic, almost predatory intensity that made people deeply uneasy. Those who met her eyes for too long reported dizziness, headaches, and a chilling sense of dread. Mary herself noticed that Katherine's eyes seemed to shift in color, Normally brown, they sometimes turned pitch black, especially during her more disturbing episodes. At times, Mary swore she could see faint, shifting shapes within her daughter's pupils, as if another presence was peering through her eyes. As Katherine's strange behavior escalated, Patrick and Mary Doyle did what any terrified parents would do. They sought help wherever they could. Being devout Catholics, they turned first to their faith. Father Timothy O'Brien of St. Leonard's Church had known the girl since her baptism and regarded her as one of the most well-mannered children in his parish. When the Doyles came to him in desperation, he initially assumed their fears were exaggerated, perhaps the product of overprotective parents misreading a difficult stage in their daughter's growth. That belief shattered when he met Katherine in person. During a pastoral visit to their home in January 1870, he tried to speak with her about simple matters of faith, but Katherine responded with unsettling theological insight. She questioned the very foundations of Catholic doctrine with sophistication that rivaled his own seminary peers. Even more disturbing, she revealed private details about the priest's life, sins, doubts, and memories from his boyhood in Ireland that he had never shared with anyone. When he demanded to know how she could possibly know these things, she simply smiled and said, "I know many things about many people." Convinced that this was no ordinary illness, Father O'Brien resolved to attempt an exorcism. The rite was performed one night in February 1870 at the Doyle home, witnessed only by the priest, the family, and an elderly deacon. What took place during that ritual haunted O'Brien for the rest of his life. In his personal journals found years later, he described it as the most terrifying experience of my priesthood. Katherine did not behave like the possessed subjects described in church texts. There were no violent convulsions, no screaming, no blasphemous outbursts. Instead, she laughed, a loud, echoing laugh that seemed to come from several voices at once. Even more horrifying, she began reciting the exorcism along with the priest, flawlessly and in perfect Latin, anticipating each line before he spoke it. After the exorcism failed, the Doyles sought help from the medical community, hoping that science could offer what faith could not. They approached Dr. Henry Morrison, a Boston physician known for his advanced understanding of mental disorders and for studying the latest psychiatric methods in Europe. A man of reason and discipline, Morrison initially dismissed the case as one of psychological trauma in a highly intelligent child. However, his skepticism quickly crumbled once he began examining Katherine. Over 2 intense weeks between February and March 1870, he documented her behavior and capabilities in exhaustive detail. His surviving reports, preserved in Boston's medical archives, remain profoundly unsettling. Dr. Morrison noted immediately that Katherine possessed exceptional intelligence, but that it was fixated almost entirely on grim and macabre subjects. She discussed human anatomy with the precision of a medical scholar, described rare diseases in exacting clinical detail, and proposed treatments far ahead of her time. During their sessions, she constantly sketched and wrote, but not the innocent drawings of a child. Her papers were filled with meticulous renderings of human skeletons, decomposing bodies and contorted figures in pain. Her skill was eerily advanced, her lines confident and anatomically correct, suggesting an education she could not have received. Morrison was equally disturbed by her writing. Katherine could compose fluent passages in Latin, ancient Greek, and even basic Egyptian hieroglyphs, none of which she had ever studied. When he asked where she had learned these languages, she replied simply, "The words come when I need them." What unsettled Morrison most were her eyes. He wrote extensively about the unbearable sensation of being watched by something far older and more intelligent than the girl before him. He also observed strange physical irregularities. Katherine's body temperature was consistently lower than normal, yet she displayed no signs of illness. Her pulse was unusually slow but steady. Even more bizarrely, the plants in his office wilted whenever she remained there for long periods despite normal conditions. The event that finally compelled the Doyles to commit Katherine to Danver State Hospital occurred one frigid night in February 1870. That night, Patrick awoke around 3 a.m, overcome by an inexplicable sense that something was wrong. The house was deathly quiet and the air felt unnaturally cold. When he checked Katherine's room, he found her bed empty. Panic-stricken, he searched every room before glancing out the kitchen window, where he saw a small figure standing motionless in the snow-covered yard. Katherine stood at the center of the yard, motionless, wearing only her thin nightgown while a fierce snowstorm raged around her. Snow had already begun to cover her, yet she did not move. Her arms were outstretched toward the sky, her head tilted back as though she were communing with the storm. Patrick rushed outside, expecting to find her near death. But to his shock, when he reached her, she was not shivering. Her skin was icy to the touch, yet she was breathing steadily and fully conscious. When he grasped her shoulders and tried to lead her inside, Katherine slowly turned her head and fixed him with a gaze he would never forget. What Patrick witnessed at that moment would forever be etched into his memory. Katherine's eyes had turned completely black. No whites, no irises, only a void where her humanity should have been. And when she spoke, her voice didn't just resonate from her mouth but seemed to vibrate through the air itself. She stared directly at Patrick with those inhuman eyes and said words that would torment him for the rest of his days. "The stars are almost aligned, Father. When they meet in their rightful place, you'll finally understand. Katherine never truly existed. She was merely preparation for something far greater." The following morning, after a night without sleep and hours of anguished discussion between Patrick, Mary, Father O'Brien, and Dr. Morrison, a devastating decision was made. Katherine would be admitted to Danver State Hospital. The choice tore her parents apart, but they knew there was no alternative. Katherine's behavior had become too unpredictable, her strength and knowledge beyond anything natural, and even Father O'Brien admitted his faith had failed to contain whatever had taken hold of her. Dr. Morrison, equally shaken, confessed he had reached the limits of medical understanding and needed the structure and equipment of a specialized institution to even begin studying her condition. For Patrick and Mary, surrendering their only daughter to strangers was an act of unbearable grief, but they also feared for their safety and hers. Katherine had grown too powerful, too strange, and too detached from reality to remain at home. Danvers Hospital, chosen for her confinement, was considered the most advanced psychiatric facility in New England at the time. Directed by the respected Dr. Elias Hartwell, it boasted modern European techniques and a commitment to meticulous documentation. Yet behind its reputation, the institution's reputation was tinged with dread. On March 15, 1870, exactly 1 year after her 8th birthday, Katherine was escorted from her Boston home to the forbidding hospital. Throughout the carriage ride, she sat in eerie silence, gazing through the window with the same ancient, knowing expression that had come to define her. Only once did she speak, turning to Dr. Morrison beside her and saying softly, "You intend to photograph me, don't you, Doctor? I wonder what your camera will see." Danvers State Hospital loomed like a monument to despair. Its vast, Gothic revival structure stretched over a kilometer, its pointed spires and arched windows silhouetted against the Massachusetts hills. It had been designed according to the principles of moral treatment, an optimistic philosophy promising recovery through order, routine, and labor. In practice, however, it had become a place for the forgotten, the incurable, and the dangerous. When Katherine arrived, over 600 patients crowded its decaying halls, where screams echoed endlessly and the air reeked of disinfectant, sweat, and hopelessness. Dr. Elias Hartwell, the hospital's superintendent, was a 52-year-old physician who had devoted his life to psychiatry. A Harvard graduate and former student of Parisian pioneers, he prided himself on his scientific rigor and skepticism. When Katherine was first brought into his office for examination, he expected to find a case of hysteria, or perhaps an early form of psychosis. He had read Dr. Morrison's dramatic reports but dismissed them as exaggeration. That skepticism dissolved within minutes of meeting her. Katherine entered the room calmly, escorted by a nurse, still wearing her plain travel dress. Instead of fear or confusion, she displayed a strange composure and a penetrating intelligence that unsettled everyone present. Before Hartwell could begin his examination, Katherine began recounting the details of 3 recent patient deaths, names, dates, and the secret circumstances surrounding them, information known only to hospital staff. Then she turned her insight upon Hartwell himself, revealing details from his private life, including moral compromises and marital tensions no one else could have known. When the shaken doctor demanded an explanation, Katherine smiled faintly and said, "I have ways of knowing things about people who matter." Initially, Katherine was placed in the hospital's pediatric ward, which housed about 20 children suffering from various disorders. It was overseen by Sister Margaret O'Connell, a seasoned Irish nun with years of experience caring for disturbed youth. But almost immediately, Katherine's presence began to disrupt the delicate order of the ward, not through violence or defiance, but through a strange, intangible influence that spread among the children like an infection. Within a week, 3 children who had previously shown improvement began displaying new and disturbing symptoms. They withdrew from games and conversation, sat motionless for hours, and stared fixedly at invisible points on the walls. 6-year-old Emma Sullivan, admitted after losing her parents in a carriage accident, began describing a tall, shadowy woman dressed entirely in black, with long hair that moved without wind and eyes like empty holes. Soon other children described the exact same figure in identical terms, as if they were all witnessing the same unseen presence haunting the ward. At first, Sister Margaret dismissed these accounts as mass hysteria, or the fertile imagination of frightened children. But her doubts grew when the children began recounting details from Katherine's life, her parents' names, private conversations in the Doyle home, and even descriptions of rooms they could never have seen. A 9-year-old boy named Timothy Chen, who had barely spoken since his admission, suddenly began talking fluently about Katherine's childhood in Ireland, sharing memories that predated her own birth. The situation escalated as the children started behaving in unison, moving through corridors in organized patterns, sitting in geometric formations during meals, and speaking together in unfamiliar languages. Dr. Hartwell, disturbed beyond measure, recorded every observation, yet nothing fit within the known frameworks of medicine or psychology. After 6 weeks of increasingly alarming phenomena, he made the painful decision to move Katherine into an isolation cell, not for violence, but to contain whatever invisible power she seemed to project onto others, and to study her under strictly controlled conditions. Katherine's isolation chamber was situated on the 3rd floor of the hospital's east wing, far removed from the bustling activity of the main wards. It was a barren cell measuring roughly 3 by 4 meters, containing only a narrow iron bed with a thin mattress, a small wooden table, a plain chair, and a metal bucket for her personal needs. A single narrow window fitted with iron bars allowed in a limited stream of daylight. This transfer into isolation marked the beginning of a more intense phase of observation and experimentation. Dr. Hartwell, resolute in his pursuit, aimed to uncover the true nature of Katherine's condition and to document it rigorously, hoping his findings would one day advance scientific understanding of rare psychological phenomena. The daily sessions between doctor and patient quickly took on an unsettling tone. Katherine refused to behave like a passive subject. Instead, she often steered the conversations herself, forcing them into deeply personal and disturbing directions. She interrogated Hartwell about his own fears, regrets, and the motives behind his devotion to psychiatry. Her ability to perceive and manipulate human weakness was nothing short of surgical. During one chilling session in May of 1870, she spoke about a tragedy from Hartwell's childhood, an incident he had never shared with another soul, the drowning of a girl named Sarah Mitchell when they were both 12. She recounted the event in unnerving precision, the gray color of the sky, the smell of the water, and even the guilt that had followed him ever since. But worse than her impossible knowledge was how she wielded it. She turned Hartwell's pain into a weapon, subtly eroding his confidence in both his profession and his sanity. Hartwell began recording the many strange phenomena that seemed to accompany Katherine's presence. Her room was consistently colder than any other part of the hospital, by as much as 4 to 6 degrees Celsius, despite all mechanical systems functioning normally. Plants left near her window wilted within days, no matter how carefully they were tended. Staff who worked close to her chamber reported persistent headaches, sudden nausea, and vivid nightmares that ceased only after they were reassigned. 2 security guards requested permanent transfers after claiming they constantly felt eyes watching them, even when Katherine appeared to be asleep. Through the summer and autumn of 1870, Hartwell initiated an experimental program that far exceeded standard psychiatric practices of the era. He became convinced that Katherine represented a phenomenon that might redefine the boundaries of human cognition. His experiments examined memory, language, perception, and reasoning. Katherine was given tests designed for highly educated adults, advanced logic puzzles, philosophical debates, and historical analyses, and she outperformed all expectations with disturbing ease. Hartwell also conducted experiments to identify the source of her inexplicable knowledge. He presented her with old photographs, ancient manuscripts, and obscure historical artifacts written in long-dead languages. Every time she demonstrated uncanny familiarity, providing names, dates, and details she had no earthly way of knowing. In one particularly revealing test, Hartwell showed her a photograph of a man who had died 10 years earlier in a distant city. Katherine immediately stated his full name, the nature of his work, how he had died, and even personal quirks of his character. When Hartwell later confirmed her claims through official records, every detail proved correct. As the experiments continued, Katherine began to exhibit what Hartwell termed premonitory capabilities. She made precise predictions of future events, and each came to pass with chilling accuracy. She foretold the deaths of 3 hospital patients, naming the exact time and cause of each death. Her insights extended to political figures and local disasters, each prediction matching reality in every respect. Yet even as her psychic and intellectual powers grew, her physical body deteriorated alarmingly during the winter of 1870-1871. The decline followed no known medical pattern and seemed tied to her anomalous manifestations. She lost weight rapidly despite eating normally. Her skin turned pale and nearly translucent, her veins visible beneath the surface, and her hair thickened and darkened into a texture more animal than human. Soon, Katherine began experiencing long episodes of complete rigidity, remaining motionless for hours. During these spells, she neither blinked nor reacted to touch or voice, though her pulse and breathing stayed steady. Hartwell noted that these catatonic phases always coincided with an escalation in supernatural activity. The air grew bitterly cold, objects shifted of their own accord, and staff reported dizziness and an overpowering sense of another presence in the room. During these rigid states, Katherine sometimes spoke, but her voice no longer seemed her own. At times it split into multiple tones at once, an unnatural harmony that disoriented anyone who heard it. At other times it took on adult voices as though several entities spoke through her body. Throughout these trance-like episodes, Katherine revealed more impossible knowledge. She described ancient historical events with precise accuracy, spoke of people who had died centuries earlier as though she had known them personally, and continued making predictions of future occurrences that came true one after another. Her prophecies grew more explicit and unnerving, naming politicians destined for sudden death, foretelling natural catastrophes with exact locations and dates, and even predicting deeply personal misfortunes in the lives of those caring for her. Each prediction unfolded exactly as she had said. In May 1871, after a year of relentless study, Dr. Hartwell made a fateful decision that would alter the course of his research. He would photograph her. The choice was not made impulsively. Hartwell had come to believe that Katherine's physical appearance itself was unstable, changing subtly depending on who observed her and under what circumstances. Some staff described her as merely a fragile, pale child, strange but ordinary in form. Others swore she radiated something profoundly unnatural, something that filled them with dread. Hartwell himself had experienced this variability firsthand. On certain days, Katherine appeared nothing more than an unusually intelligent 9-year-old. On others, particularly during her rigid states, her face seemed to age, her eyes grew darker, and he felt he was gazing at something far older and infinitely more powerful than a child. He hoped that by photographing her he might finally capture an objective record of her true appearance, evidence immune to subjective perception, a visual truth that could be analyzed and compared over time. Hartwell also suspected the camera might reveal what the human eye could not, something hidden within Katherine that lay beyond the limits of natural vision. At the time, medical photography was still an emerging discipline but was rapidly gaining importance as a means of documenting psychiatric patients. Several leading hospitals had begun utilizing photography to maintain visual records of patients, both for identification and for studying possible links between facial expressions, body posture, and mental illness. Dr. Hartwell reached out to James Thornton, a photographer well known for his work in medical portraiture and for collaborating with psychiatric institutions throughout the Boston region. Thornton had a reputation for strict professionalism, technical precision, and an exceptional ability to handle patients of varying mental and physical conditions. When Hartwell outlined Katherine's case, Thornton responded with scientific curiosity and professional intrigue. Having photographed hundreds of psychiatric subjects over the years, he was accustomed to strange and unpredictable situations. Thornton consented to carry out the photographic session under strictly controlled conditions, employing specialized equipment capable of capturing subtle variations in light, tone, and detail. The session was set for the morning of June 15, 1871, exactly 15 months after Katherine had first been admitted to the hospital. Hartwell deliberately selected a Thursday morning, as Katherine tended to be more composed and responsive during the early hours of the day. James Thornton arrived punctually at 9 a.m., carrying with him his cumbersome apparatus, a large-format camera mounted on a heavy tripod, several glass plates for image capture, and an array of chemical solutions required to develop photographs on site. Having extensive experience photographing psychiatric patients, he was well prepared for the typical challenges: restlessness, defiance, or erratic behavior. However, upon entering Katherine's isolation room, Thornton immediately sensed something peculiar. The ambient light appeared unnatural, as though subtly warped or dimmed by her presence. The air seemed thick, and a faint shadowy haze clung to the corners, concentrating most noticeably around the child. Katherine sat calmly in her wooden chair, dressed in the plain gray cotton gown standard for female patients. She observed Thornton with keen interest, but there was none of the naive curiosity expected from a child. Instead, she appeared to study both the man and his instruments with an almost knowing awareness, as though she understood precisely what he intended to do. During the 30 minutes of preparation, she did not utter a single word nor shift her position once. Thornton noted that she instinctively adjusted her posture and gaze in perfect alignment with his instructions before he even gave them, as though anticipating the photographic process itself. When the moment finally arrived, Thornton adjusted the camera's focus and instructed Katherine to look directly into the lens. It was then that something wholly inexplicable occurred, an event that Thornton would later describe as the most unsettling moment of my professional life. As soon as Katherine's eyes met the camera, Thornton felt an intense jolt course through his body, like a wave of invisible energy. The temperature in the room plummeted so sharply that he shivered. More disturbingly, he became overwhelmed by the conviction that he wasn't merely photographing Katherine, but something vast and unseen that existed through her. Thornton released the shutter, holding the exposure for roughly 15 seconds, the necessary time for a clear image using 19th century photographic methods. During those seconds, he maintained unbroken eye contact with Katherine and later described the eerie sensation that she was simultaneously photographing him through the camera's lens. Afterward, he moved swiftly to develop the plate in a temporary darkroom nearby, following the intricate and hazardous procedures involving silver nitrate and other volatile chemicals. Experienced though he was, Thornton immediately realized that something was wrong. The reactions were erratic, producing strange swirling patterns and uneven contrasts unlike anything he had encountered. As the image slowly materialized, both Thornton and Dr. Hartwell stood in complete silence, transfixed by what emerged. The photograph was, in one sense, perfectly ordinary. Katherine sat exactly as she had during the session, wearing the same clothing, the same chair, the same dim background. Yet it was profoundly different. Her eyes seemed alive in the image, appearing to follow observers no matter the angle from which they viewed it. They possessed an unnatural depth, as if layer upon layer of hidden worlds existed behind them. People who looked at the photograph for too long reported a vertiginous feeling, as if being drawn into those dark, endless eyes. Even Katherine's facial expression appeared subtly displaced, slightly misaligned with reality, as though the camera had captured a glimpse of something normally imperceptible. Stranger still were the shadows. In the developed plate, faint figures and shifting outlines hovered near the edges of the image, though none had been present in the room. It appeared that other entities, or impressions of them, had somehow been recorded beside Katherine. The photograph immediately became an object of obsession within Danver's hospital. Hartwell convened a special meeting of senior physicians to analyze the image and debate its implications. Dr. William Foster, the institution's second-ranking physician, initially proposed a rational explanation, that the disturbing effects were caused by technical flaws, perhaps uneven chemical development or distortions due to the peculiar lighting in Katherine's room. Yet his argument quickly lost weight when Thornton produced a series of control photographs taken under identical conditions. Same camera, same chemicals, same room, and each came out entirely normal. The anomalies occurred only in Katherine's image. Dr. Margaret Sinclair, one of the hospital's few female psychiatrists, then advanced a more radical idea. She theorized that Katherine suffered from an extremely rare neurological disorder that influenced both her mental state and her physical interaction with the surrounding environment. Citing European case studies, Sinclair referenced patients who allegedly exhibited telekinetic phenomena during extreme psychosis. Her theory gained credibility when compared to the documented events: objects moving without contact, sharp temperature drops, and physiological effects on others in proximity. She proposed that Katherine's body might be generating unusual bioelectric fields capable of altering her environment. While intrigued, Dr. Hartwell remained cautiously skeptical. He proposed a series of controlled experiments to determine whether Katherine emitted any measurable form of physical energy. These would include precise readings of temperature, magnetism, and photographic tests using experimental methods to detect potential energy fields. As word of Katherine's case spread, copies of her photograph were sent to other psychiatric researchers in Boston, New York, and across Europe. Every expert who examined the image admitted to finding it deeply perplexing. None had ever seen comparable distortions in decades of medical photography. Among the respondents was Dr. Heinrich Zimmermann, a renowned German psychiatrist celebrated for his research on hysteria and dissociative states. After closely studying the photograph, Zimmermann wrote a detailed letter proposing that Katherine might suffer from an extreme form of multiple personality disorder, one so profound that each personality not only occupied her mind but subtly altered her physical form, producing variations visible to the photographic lens though imperceptible to the naked eye. After the photography session in June 1871, Katherine's condition began to decline at a pace that astonished even Dr. Hartwell, who had already witnessed her gradual physical and mental weakening over the preceding months. It was as though the simple act of being photographed had triggered a profound transformation within her. Katherine started slipping into catatonic trances that lasted much longer than before. What once endured only a few hours now stretched into days. During these prolonged episodes, she remained completely immobile, her body stiff as stone, yet she appeared aware of her surroundings. Her eyes stayed open, alert, and eerily responsive, following movement and locking onto specific individuals without a word. Even more unsettling was that, during these extended states of paralysis, the paranormal disturbances surrounding her grew far stronger. The air in her room turned frigid enough to frost the windows, even during the height of summer. Objects would shift and sometimes hurl across the room with such violence that walls and furniture sustained damage. Hospital staff began reporting increasingly alarming experiences when entering Katherine's isolation chamber. Many claimed to hear whispers in unknown languages, to glimpse shadow-like figures flickering at the edges of their vision, or to suffer overwhelming waves of nausea and dizziness. In August 1871, Sister Margaret O'Connell, who had bravely tended to Katherine for months, submitted a formal request for permanent reassignment. In her letter, she wrote, "I can no longer in good conscience continue working near that child. Whatever afflicts her seems to spread beyond her room, and I fear for everyone's safety." Katherine's physical decline worsened dramatically after the photography incident. Her body wasted away until she appeared almost skeletal, her skin becoming so translucent that veins and tendons were visible beneath the surface. Her once light hair turned pitch black and grew with unnatural speed, reaching an extraordinary length in only weeks. Then in September 1871, Katherine entered what would be her final catatonic state. For 6 consecutive weeks she lay completely still, without food, water, or speech, defying every medical expectation. Physiologically, she should have perished within days, yet she somehow sustained life, her heart and lungs continuing to function without any apparent nourishment. Throughout those last weeks, she remained fully conscious, her eyes darting across the room, often fixing intensely on invisible points, as though she perceived things others could not. Occasionally her lips would move faintly, whispering to unseen presences. Katherine Doyle died quietly on the morning of November 2, 1871, at just 9 years old. Dr. Hartwell was by her side and later described her passing as strangely serene. No struggle, no pain. She simply closed her eyes and stopped breathing during one of the rare moments when her room was calm and free of unexplained activity. The instant she died, the temperature in her room abruptly normalized for the first time in months. Yet her death did not end the mystery. Rather, it deepened it. The post-mortem examination conducted by Dr. Hartwell and a visiting physician from Boston uncovered physiological anomalies unlike anything they had encountered. Katherine's internal organs appeared perfectly healthy, showing no signs of illness or deterioration that could account for her death. Her brain revealed an extraordinary pattern. Some regions were far more developed than expected for a child of her age, while others remained strikingly underdeveloped, resembling early embryonic tissue. Stranger still, her corpse resisted normal decomposition. Without any preservation, her body remained remarkably intact for weeks, as though decay itself had been delayed or suppressed. When Katherine was finally laid to rest in the hospital cemetery, new phenomena began to occur. Vegetation refused to grow over her grave. The soil above her burial site stayed perpetually cold, and visitors frequently described sensations of unease, dizziness, or chills when passing nearby. Dr. Hartwell devoted the remainder of his life to studying her case, publishing a series of scholarly works that became essential reading in psychiatric circles, not because they solved the mystery, but because they documented events that defied the established limits of medicine. Katherine's photograph, meanwhile, became one of the most examined and controversial images in medical history. Copies circulated across Europe and America, drawing scientists and physicians into endless debate. Explanations ranged from flawed chemical processes to optical illusions, yet none could explain the profound psychological effect the photograph had on those who viewed it. Decades after her death, researchers continued to visit the archives at Danver's hospital to examine Katherine's medical files. Dr. Hartwell's detailed notes provided an invaluable record of a case that resisted any clear classification. In 1923, more than 50 years later, the renowned psychologist Carl Jung personally reviewed Katherine's photograph and surviving documentation. He concluded that her case represented an extreme manifestation of what he termed synchronicity, meaningful coincidences unbound by causation. Jung proposed that Katherine might have served as a convergence point for overlapping psychic realities, a living intersection where the invisible became visible. Through the lens of modern neuroscience and psychology, Katherine Doyle's condition offers an array of interpretive possibilities unavailable to 19th-century physicians. Some contemporary researchers theorize that she suffered from a rare variant of temporal lobe epilepsy, affecting regions of the brain responsible for memory, language, and time perception. This disorder could, in theory, explain her uncanny knowledge through a phenomenon known as cryptomnesia, the unconscious retrieval of forgotten sensory information. Dr. Sarah Chen, a neurobiologist at Harvard University who has extensively re-examined the case, proposed that Katherine's brain might have possessed heightened sensitivity to environmental stimuli, allowing her to unconsciously detect and interpret micro-expressions, pheromones, and other subtle cues with impossible precision, thereby giving the illusion of clairvoyance. Another hypothesis points to a combination of extreme savant syndrome and severe dissociation, suggesting Katherine might have housed multiple identities, each exhibiting distinct abilities and memories, accounting for her unexplained fluency in unfamiliar languages and her profound intellectual versatility. Even so, none of these scientific interpretations adequately explain the tangible physical manifestations reported in her presence. The temperature drops, object movements, and photographic distortions. A growing number of modern investigators have speculated that Katherine might have been what we now describe as a highly sensitive individual with unique bioelectrical irregularities. This model posits that certain rare people may emit subtle electromagnetic fields, capable of influencing nearby materials, instruments, and ambient conditions. Regardless of which theory one accepts, Katherine Doyle's case left an indelible mark on both medical science and cultural imagination. Her story became a cornerstone in the study of anomalous human phenomena, inspiring generations of psychiatrists, neurologists, and parapsychologists. Dr. Hartwell's painstakingly detailed records help define the modern standards of documentation for extraordinary medical cases. His commitment to methodical observation, balancing skepticism with open inquiry, set a precedent for how researchers approach phenomena that lie at the borders of established science. More than a century and a half after her passing, Katherine Doyle remains an enduring enigma, a haunting reminder of the vast frontier between what is known and what is yet to be understood. Her life and death continue to blur the boundaries between psychology, medicine, and mysteries that transcend the limits of human comprehension. What makes Katherine's case particularly captivating is not only the extraordinary nature of her symptoms, but also the remarkable quality of its medical documentation. Dr. Hartwell and his team compiled a detailed, scientifically rigorous record that allows present-day researchers to revisit her case using conceptual and analytical methods unavailable in the 19th century. When we look at Katherine's photograph today, we perceive the same unsettling impression the physicians of her time described, an image that is both recognizable and profoundly disturbing. Her eyes convey a depth of intelligence and experience that seems far beyond her years, and her expression suggests an awareness and knowledge that no 9-year-old should possess. While modern theories attempt to account for certain aspects of her condition, none have managed to fully explain the totality of documented phenomena. This doesn't necessarily imply supernatural causes, but rather highlights how our current understanding of neurology, psychology, and physics may still fall short when confronted with extreme anomalies such as Katherine's case serves as a profound reminder that human experience often transcends the boundaries of established science. It challenges our inclination to fit every phenomenon into familiar frameworks and urges us to remain open to the possibility that some experiences operate beyond our present comprehension. Perhaps the most significant lesson from Katherine's story lies in the value of careful observation and meticulous documentation of unexplained events. Dr. Hartwell and his team resisted the temptation to form premature conclusions, instead focusing on thoroughly recording every detail of what they witnessed. Their disciplined approach produced an invaluable historical record that continues to shape modern research into the unexplained. Katherine's photograph endures as a haunting visual testimony to one of the most extraordinary medical enigmas ever recorded. Each time we gaze upon it, we are compelled to confront profound questions about the nature of reality, the boundaries of human perception, and the mysteries that still lie hidden within the human mind. Though Katherine Doyle's life lasted only 9 short years, her legacy continues to intrigue and inspire researchers more than a century later. Her story reminds us that our world remains filled with deep mysteries, and that sometimes the questions themselves hold greater meaning than the answers. If Katherine's case has captured your fascination and you wish to explore more such enigmas, historical medical mysteries that defy logic, old photographs concealing disturbing truths, and macabre stories that science has struggled to explain, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. We have countless similar accounts awaiting discovery. 19th century patients who exhibited impossible abilities, medical images that revealed more than they should have, and haunting mysteries that continue to baffle researchers even today. Turn on notifications so you never miss these extraordinary stories hidden within the archives of medical history. Until the next macabre tale.